Hello and welcome to Trade of the Week for the week starting Monday, the 14th of November. Let's look back at last week's trade, which was short NASDAQ. Now, bear in mind, I was saying that when we were expecting to see this market move lower once again, I was expecting the NASDAQ to be the leader in the pack. But that also works on the flip side. And certainly when we saw that core inflation reading in particular, headline also moving lower, we saw a big move towards the upside for equity markets, and NASDAQ led that move. So we have seen this move take us out of the trade, unfortunately. You can see on the top end, 11660 is that resistance level that's now been breached. It points towards a potential wider retracement coming into play. Personally, I think that inflation's not necessarily something that's done with. We're at 7.7 over in the US, and we're expecting to see UK inflation move higher once again this week. So certainly for me, maybe this creates the basis for a strong period over the course of the back end of this year. But even if that comes into fruition, I would see this as a potential area where this market's going to roll over once again. I think there's plenty of hurdles that could come into fruition, one of which would be energy prices. If we see another spike, we're looking at the potential for a second bounce in inflation, and that sets people back in terms of their expectations for a loosening phase from the central banks. But certainly, while central banks are now talking about the potential for them to, like the Federal Reserve in particular, for them to start easing back on the rate of upside for interest rates, that's very different from them cutting interest rates. The terminal rate's probably going to be relatively similar to what we were expecting previously, and they're also going to have to maintain it at elevated levels for some time with the recession in 2023 to be able to drive down inflation and try and make sure that there's not a second push higher in terms of inflation. So that at some point is going to kick into investor mindset. But for the time being, people feeling relatively optimistic, and therefore we've seen this rally through resistance, giving us this little double bottom formation and the potential for a wider rally coming into play. Now, like I've said, I see the wider picture as having the potential for another major move lower, but I also am aware of the fact that that inflation data has made people feel a lot better about the outlook going forward. I think inflation is going to be key once again this week. I'm looking at sterling against the Japanese yen. Inflation from the UK is expected to reach 10.5%. That points towards a divergence between US inflation and European inflation. That points towards the potential for a Bank of England, which will have to remain steadfast in its approach to drive down inflation and potentially raise rates at a faster rate, keep them elevated for longer and alike. So that's pointing towards possible strength for the pound. The yen, of course, is a currency whose central bank has essentially been happy to target growth over inflation because inflation isn't necessarily the same kind of problem over in Japan. And arguably, they're playing catch up. They've had years of zero inflation. So now that they're around about 3%, it's not necessarily the end of the world. So we have been seeing a pullback here, and that's taken us back towards this 76.4 Fibonacci level. What I'm looking for here is just looking for that one-for-one trade and putting my stop below this 159.75 swing low and looking for a move back up to your 172.20. So my target's 172.20. Towards the downside, I put my stop loss just below here, around about 159.30, let's say. And hopefully when it comes to that UK inflation data, hopefully I don't get done by inflation 2 times in a row, it will serve as a reminder that the UK and Europe is in a very different position from the US, and that could further drive the pound towards the upside as we move forward. So long sterling yen with a stop loss at 159.30 and a take profit at 172.20.
For more videos from us here at IGTV, join us on Twitter at IGCom, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.